Hey guys, and welcome back. Don't worry, Darling's been in theaters for almost 2 weeks now, and I just had the chance to see it, so we're going to talk about it right now. Alice and Jack Chambers, played by Florence Pugh and Harry Styles respectively, live a seemingly idyllic life in the fictional 1950s town of Victory, but not everything is as it seems. The film's central mystery is built around the true nature of Victory, an enigmatic company headed by textbook cult leader Frank, played by Chris Pine. Alice begins to question inexplicable happenings around the town, to which the men of Victory reply, "Don't worry, darling." Look, I'll cut right to the chase and say that this movie is not nearly as bad as you've probably heard it is, and any criticisms at the extreme end about the film's plot, performances, or production should probably be taken with a grain of salt. I'm not going to spend any meaningful amount of time rehashing any production drama surrounding the film because it's out there. I mean, literally for like a month, if you spend any time in the internet, it was inescapable. So let's talk about this movie as objectively as we can, all things considered. Olivia Wilde's in the director's chair for this film and demonstrates that she has an eye for atmosphere. The movie looks great and it's shot very well. There are some pacing issues towards the middle of the film once the movie's central mystery is revealed, but moment to moment, the film does a great job of establishing a sense of unease. That said, I do think that there were some scenes that carried on too long or probably could have been cut just for lack of relevance or importance to the overall film. There's a scene in the movie's second act where Jack is doing this extended dance sequence while Alice is talking to a neighbor about some of her newfound concerns about the town. And this dance sequence goes on like for several minutes. It feels like it could have been hours. It's just so long and it feels unnecessary. And by the film's conclusion, quite frankly, I felt like it was unnecessary. So stuff like that lengthened this movie into 2 solid hours. And I really think that it could have been done in probably an hour and a half. In fact, I think this movie would have been very successful as a singular episode on a show like Black Mirror if it hadn't done it already. My point is, if you have a movie with 2 hours of content, you need to make good on the ask of that time commitment by delivering a conclusion that's worthy of your audience's investment. And in that respect, I think this movie falls short. One thing that's on a lot of critics' minds, and is probably the greatest sin that this movie commits, is that there are some glaring, gaping plot holes that just go completely unaddressed by the time the credits roll. Look, I can't get into these plot holes without spoilers, so I'll just say that to me, a hallmark of good science fiction is that the fictional science has to be consistent. If you want to make up rules for how some sort of device or supernatural power is explained, then fine, but you've got to stick to those rules. You're already asking the audience to suspend their disbelief about the fictional science that you're introducing. You break the rules that you make up for your fictional science, you risk breaking your audience's immersion. Yes, Florence Pugh does a fantastic job as Alice. She jumps headfirst into the role and she just sells it with this easy, natural earnestness that makes her very believable in every scene. This is a hallmark of most of the projects that she's worked on, at least in recent memory. And I can't think of a time where there's been a movie that she's been a featured player in where she doesn't stand out as a huge talent. Now, a lot of critics out there are just gushing over Florence's performance as Alice, and I'm not going to say that that praise is undeserved, but I can't help but to wonder if other critics or movie watchers are using their praise of Florence Pugh's performance in this movie as kind of like an excuse to just dunk on other aspects about this movie, from its production to its plot, etc., with impunity. Because objectively, Alice doesn't feel like a role that Florence Pugh was born to play. She does a fantastic job with the role, and you'd still be impressed, but maybe in a way that you'd kind of expect to be impressed by one of today's best actors. In that way, I would call her performance serviceable, but to the highest degree. In spite of virtually non-stop maligning and a lot of online scrutiny, I have to say that Harry Styles was not nearly as bad in this movie as I expected him to be based on what I've previously read. His acting was mostly forgettable, except for a couple of standout scenes, but I have to say that he brings a laudable physicality to the acting in this movie. And at the risk of spoilers, I will also say that he does a fantastic job of bringing about the embodiment of a character change that comes about in the film's third act. I think that the foundation of a great actor is there. Certainly I think that the material that he was working with in this particular movie could have been handled better by a more seasoned actor. That's certain. But should Harry Styles continue acting, I do think that there is perhaps a role out there for him that could be extremely successful. Now consider that a lot of what an actor brings to a film corresponds directly to what a director brings out of him or her. It's possible that production issues, including the fact that Harry Styles was brought in as Shia LaBeouf's replacement well after production had begun on this film, was a contributing or were contributing factors into a performance that was perhaps less than it could have been. Nobody, as far as I can tell at least, is talking about Nick Kroll's role in this film, which personally I found quite bad and a confounding miscast. Look, this is a genre film, but Nick Kroll has virtually zero experience acting in any straight dramas, let alone psych thrillers, from what I can tell. Like, his casting in this movie felt a lot like maybe a favor to a friend. And if you're a Nick Kroll fan, I'm sorry. I like Nick Kroll, he's hilarious in What We Do in the Shadows, but this just wasn't it for me. But like I alluded to at the beginning of this review, there are issues with this movie, but you gotta sift through some of the extreme criticisms from the haters who were always gonna dump on this movie because of preconceived notions about the film that they derived from, drama that shows up online, about pre-production issues that the film was having, to maybe pre-established feelings that some of these people, moviegoer or critic, have about the people involved in that process. All in all, this movie is just fine. The plot, while maybe a little bit predictable, isn't horrible. Visually, this movie is gorgeous and definitely worth spending a couple of hours with. I do think that narratively and thematically, this movie has borrowed quite liberally from a lot of other pre-existing TV shows and movies, and I do think that ultimately, some of those pre-existing stories, particularly the USS Callister episode of Black Mirror from season 4, frankly executed this particular premise more effectively. But if you haven't seen it already, consider seeing this movie, because at the very least, there's an interesting conversation waiting for you and whoever you see the movie with at the end of the film. Thanks again for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments. Are you going to see this movie? Did you see this movie? Did you like this movie? Are you going to wait for this movie to show up on probably HBO Max inevitably within the next couple of months? Let me know. More film stuff to come.